But with that, I'll jump right in. I have 6 total strategies: take advice or don't take advice. And I say that because people have a lot of different advice to give. And even though everyone is well-meaning, the big secret is that not all advice is good advice for you. People, your parents, family, friends, colleagues, the internet are full of advice that was probably good for someone at some point, but they don't know you like you know yourself. And so what I would say is that listen to advice from several sources, but then consider if this aligns well with your goals, your values, your situation, and also consider maybe the context in which the advice is given, and that person's goals, values, and situation. And think about if it really fits what you want in your life, and then you can decide to take it or not. I've been given mostly great advice in my life, but there have been some times where there was advice that I knew just wasn't right. And sometimes in the end, it comes down to your instincts on whether or not to take it. And so I would say this even applies to everything I'm saying today. My advice comes from my context, experience, values, what I wanted out of university and graduate studies. And so take it, roll it around, see if it feels right for you. And if it doesn't, then feel free to completely ignore everything I say. But alas, I'm still going to give you some advice. But first, I'm going to give you an example of some advice I received. So a bit of the context about me is after I got my master's degree in medical physics, I wasn't sure if I wanted to pursue a PhD yet. So I didn't. And what I did was I went to work in the clinic. And I worked for 4 years. I got board certified in the US. And at that time, I was deciding, did I now want to go back for my PhD? And so I was getting lots of advice at that time from people trying to make this big decision. And one of the pieces of advice I got from a colleague was to find a research project that got me through the PhD program as fast as possible so I could get back to work. I did not follow this advice. This person was well-meaning. They knew I was leaving my full job with full salary to go back to being a student, and were concerned that I was losing out on money and savings for my future. And so while they had my best interests at heart, I did not feel it was the right advice for me. Better advice for me came from people who asked me questions like, well, what do you want out of PhD? Why are you going back? And for me, it was because I had decided I wanted to pursue a research career, but I didn't feel like I had the skill set necessary to do that at that time. And so instead, I chose a project that matched what I was interested in and my aspirations for my career. And I ended up, I had been attending talks about global health for some of the researchers at MD Anderson Cancer Center, and connected with an advisor who had a project. And I like to think that choosing that path is part of why I'm here today. In my project, I was able to work with 2 cancer centers in South Africa and 1 in the Philippines. And I've continued making connections and trying to do different work for global health, which is how I got involved with the Nigerian Association of Medical Physics. So I'm really glad I ignored this advice, and I offer this up as an example for you to take and see if it's okay for you to ignore some advice. Okay, now moving on to strategy number 2, choosing a research focus. And this can apply at any time if you're doing smaller research projects during your undergraduate studies at university, or even moving on to picking the big PhD project. And I know a lot of me and my colleagues stressed a lot about this decision. It felt like a huge decision that was maybe going to decide the rest of our career. And what if we didn't make the right decision? And of course, with hindsight being what it is, 2020, I can say that it might decide the rest of your career, but it doesn't have to. And so, I wouldn't worry too much and think this is a decision that, I have to make the most 100% correct decision and look into the future. Choosing a research direction is an opportunity to establish yourself as an expert in a certain area. However, it's also about gaining skills about how to tackle research questions, how to do different kinds of experiments, use computational tools, building models. So even if you are establishing expertise in one direction, a lot of those skills are translatable to different directions. And so if you get into your project and you realize maybe this isn't a direction you want to continue forever, that's okay. When you're going on to the next step, you just need to think about how you can leverage those skills to do something that maybe you realize you're more interested in. And so I think, to me, I would say not to over stress this, and good questions to ask yourself are what excites you, and also, more importantly, what advisor is right for you. This is going to be a very close working relationship that is going to have a huge impact on not only your time in graduate school or throughout your research project, but also will set you up for your next steps in the future. And if it's not a good working relationship, then it's not going to be fruitful no matter how interesting the topic is to you. And so I would say you have to make your best decision you can here, but also it's not a decision that you can't come back from. And if a project or advisor is not working out, you might be able to change course. I know a few people have done this, and I'm not just, saying at the first speed bump, jump ship and try to change your advisor or your project. But there are certain cases where this could be called for. And in the end, it might be better for everyone involved. Chances are, if it's not working for you, it might not be working for your advisor either. And you just need to maybe have that conversation with them. And I'll give two examples from people I know who have done this. The first is someone who had an amazing advisor and had a great relationship with her advisor. However, she just really felt like the research direction was not something she was passionate in, and that was really important to her. And so after many conversations, she decided to switch projects to a new advisor and ended up loving her new research direction, excelling, winning awards, and her career has just really taken off and been very successful since then. And she still has a very good relationship with that first advisor. The other student I know who did it did not have a good experience with their first advisor. The advisor was new, was not a great communicator, and was really, it was a project where she had to gain a lot of new skills, and she was not being supported by the advisor and just floundering. And so she ended up changing advisors, changing projects, and just was night and day, a totally different person afterward, where her confidence was better, and she, similar to the first story, excelled, was getting talks and presentations at meetings and just in a much happier place, and again is now doing really wonderfully in her career. But I would emphasize, again, this is not a decision to be taken lightly, and it depends on many factors, but I just, it's better to change course than to maybe kind of keep, trying to go down the same path that's not going anywhere. So definitely keep that in mind. Okay, strategy number 3 is to make the most of the opportunities that you have at this very special time in your life as a student. Hindsight has taught me that being a student is just a unique opportunity that once you are in the workforce, working in a hospital or a university or other position engineering firm, you don't really get to have this time dedicated to yourself. And I think that means you should take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. So it's a time where you can learn new things, you can acquire skills, you can focus on improving yourself, and you can discover your passions. And so I think I wish I still had full time to do this today, but I don't always. And I'm glad that I took advantage of a lot of these opportunities when I was in grad school. Going back to the example, when I was trying to discover a research direction, I knew I had started hearing more and seeing the publications about what radiation therapy was outside of the US, in places like South America and Africa and Asia, and became very interested in that. And so was attending these extra seminars and learning a lot. And I met my advisor there, and that opportunity turned into basically my whole career now. I've also, took advantage of opportunities earlier in my career where I knew I was interested in doing specific clinical tasks. So I took on extra clinical projects to work on my skills there. And that helped me get a job at that time where I needed that skill. And I ended up having a job doing the fun parts of medical physics that I loved. So that is my strategy number 3, is to take advantage of this time as being a student. Okay, strategy number 4 of 6 might be my favorite one, and it's to fail to succeed. I've seen a lot of different analogies about what it's like along your research journey. It's not a straight line from A to B, but it's more like a squiggle, not always going the direction you want, or backtracking. And I'd like to take it one step further. I actually think it's more like this, where not only is it not a straight path and a path where you curve, you will sometimes just spiral in place and work on things that end up not going anywhere. And that is totally normal. I remember when I first joined my lab for my PhD group, seeing the older students who had these very polished seeming presentations about their whole research they'd been doing for 5 years. And then when I looked at what I was doing, it did not feel like that nice, tidy picture. And what they told us was, we were like you when we started. It's only at the end when you can piece everything together and tell a cohesive story. You're not talking about the parts that you spiraled out on. Those just disappear into the ether. And it's all going to be okay. And so I want to share that with you. If you ever feel like you're spiraling or on a tangent or things aren't going as planned, that is totally normal. And, as much as sometimes it's hard to talk about failure, there's actually a lot of great quotes from very famous, successful people about their failure. And hopefully you all know who this is, Michael Jordan. If not, it's going to make me feel very old. If you don't know, he is like LeBron James is now, but when I was a kid. And I loved Michael Jordan. I wanted to be a basketball player when I was a kid. I said I wanted to be 7 feet tall. And I also loved the movie Space Jam. So he's one of my heroes. And he has this great quote that says, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and miss. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. And this, we're not professional basketball players, but this still is very applicable to us. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and that applies in grad school. If you don't try different things, apply for scholarships or programs, or try research experiments, they're definitely not going to succeed, and it's very normal. Luckily, our failures are not so public as Michael Jordan's, but I think he's doing all right. He's very successful despite all these failures that he's had. Another one that maybe might be less familiar is someone who I really admire is a famous photographer named Jimmy Chin. If you don't know him, he is an adventurer, rock climber, and he directed the movie Free Solo about another climber, Alex Honnold, climbing a big wall without ropes here in the US, and he won an Oscar for it. And so I want you to just think in your head, how many photos do you think Oscar-winning director and photographer Jimmy Chin takes for every one we see? And I would say the answer is thousands. And now I've never met Jimmy Chin, I've never talked to him, but I have seen talks and gone to lectures by other, very successful photographers who have their pictures in National Geographic magazine. And they all say, I take thousands of pictures for every single one that sells, and that it doesn't matter all those photos that they took that never sell. What matters are the ones that do. And so this is another example of where that's actually a really high failure rate if you do the hard math, but that is just what it takes to get that good shot that is going to be in a magazine. And in a way, I feel like that's a little more analogous to the kind of failures we might have, where we're not live on TV trying to shoot the game-winning basket. We go through a lot of hard work before we actually get the data that's going to be published in a paper, or get that degree that we're going for at the end of our graduate school journey. And so, because, even though there's all these great quotes, I do feel like there is still some stigma about failing. I have decided to share ways that I have failed in my career. So let's see, what did I have first? Yeah, I've had lots of experiments fail, but then what happened is that I learned something every time an experiment failed, and I did it better the next time, and eventually the experiments all succeeded. I got the papers published, I got my PhD, and so without those failures, I would have never succeeded. I also have applied for many scholarships that I did not get, but then I did get some of them. And anytime you're applying for things like this, it's like shooting the basket, it's a numbers game. And so you can't think about, it didn't matter any of the scholarships that I didn't get. What mattered is the ones I did get. And then finally, I did not pass my PhD candidacy exam the first time I took it. But I was given remedial work and I passed later. And I was really excited to share these different examples. I feel like they're different flavors of failing. And one thing I would like about the last one is that I don't necessarily think it was one of those failures that I learned something or you had to take a bunch of shots. Some failures are just painful and you have to, persevere and move on through them. And if I hadn't, then I would have never gotten to finish my PhD. And yes, maybe I learned something from the remedial work, I don't know, but it was just something I had to get through. The other reason I wanted to share this is because at the time I felt like everybody was passing. And everyone said, oh, you're gonna pass, don't worry. And then I didn't. And I went home that night and I was just so, tired and upset. And I told myself though, I said, I bet in a few years, this isn't even going to matter. And that is 100% true. It didn't matter when I was applying for jobs. It didn't matter. I still got invited to come here and talk to you guys. And so I think that I had that moment of wisdom, and it really helped me push through and buck up and, get the work done and move forward. But also when I told people, I was very open about it, I started hearing from, oh yeah, I didn't pass either. And it was like this big secret everyone was keeping. And so that's part of why I wanted to share my failures today, because to start just, say it's okay to fail, it's normal, there should be no stigma about it. But even with all that, failing is hard, it feels bad in the moment, and it's just something we have to get through in life. And if none of that else works for you to help you through your failures, then I would suggest you channel Thomas Edison, inventor of the light bulb and many other things, who says that he has not failed, he's just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And I think this applies a lot to research and studies. If you try enough different things, you're going to eventually find the thing that works. Okay, my second to last strategy is to walk the walk. And what I mean by this is kind of, if you want to do something, don't just talk about it, do it. Don't just say you want to do something, show that you want to do something. And so I want to put you in the position of someone who has to hire new faculty for a teaching position. Let's say it's a physics department, and the role is going to be a big part teaching. And so you have two candidates, and candidate X says, I'm enthusiastic about teaching, so I was a teaching assistant for 2 semesters, versus candidate Y, who says, I am so enthusiastic about teaching. And so who would you hire? If it were me, despite the very nice use of an exclamation point and the, supposed enthusiasm of candidate Y, candidate X actually has taught. And so I know they know what it takes and they're still interested. So I'm definitely going to go with candidate X, because they're not only telling me they want to teach, they've shown me that they want to teach. And I think, maybe depending where you are in your school career, a job might be far away. But really what you're doing now is preparing for that future job, whatever that looks like for you. And actions definitely speak louder than words. And what I would recommend is for you to think about, what do you want to do in the future, and what can you do now to build towards that? So for example, if you want a research career in a lab, you should try to find positions or opportunities, either volunteer or projects that expose you to that. And that way you have that experience to leverage in the future and show and set yourself up for success in pursuing that path. And the bonus is that you actually find out if you like doing the work. You might think, oh, I love doing lab work, I want to be in there with petri dishes and pipettes, and find out that you actually really don't like it. And it's a good thing you found out now before you spent your whole career preparing for it, and then realize you don't like it once you get that job. And so, right, actions speak louder than words, walk the walk, and you'll set yourself up for success. So the final one I want to talk about is probably the most important, and one that I actually don't think I appreciated very much in grad school, but have come to appreciate more now and wish I had taken better care of my mental health. And I'll just admit that when I was preparing this talk, I have so many things I could say and want to say about this topic. and I wanted to say them just right. And I don't know if I have found the way, but I'm going to do the best I can. I've never spoken about this in a presentation before, but I think it's really important. So I'm going to go for it. There's a lot of stigma around mental health. I think that's pretty universal, not just in the US. And while I see signs that people are trying to address that and turning around, it's still really hard, especially in our fields, sciences, engineering, where we have a lot of very smart, high-performing people who are very, dedicated, that it can be hard to equate that someone who is doing well and successful and seems mentally tough might also be struggling with mental health. But the truth is that in these very demanding fields, we actually see higher rates of people struggling with mental health, anxiety, depression, addiction, all these things. And I will tell you from firsthand experience, I know how this feels because I am someone who struggles with mental health. I have anxiety. Anxiety is, has a purpose in our life. Everyone feels it, but my anxiety was more than it should be. And I actually take medicine every day to help me with my anxiety. However, it took me a really long time to admit that I needed help. And so I know firsthand that it can be very difficult to seek out help, but I am so glad I did. And I wish I had done it sooner. And it doesn't, and I would suggest the same for you if you think you might be struggling with mental health. And I'm not going to, necessarily say what you need to do. There are so many resources out there that you can look into, and you can rely on your support system or see a doctor, or find a group at school maybe, or a counselor, someone you trust to talk to about it. But I definitely would say to try to address it early before it has a real negative impact on your life. And give yourself grace. It doesn't make you any less of a person. It doesn't make you any less mentally tough. It's not something you can just muscle your way through. And so give yourself grace and give others grace. I think also, just going back to the stigma around it, I realized that some people may think less of me knowing that I'm a person who needs medicine to deal with my anxiety. They might think I'm not mentally tough or able enough. And that's a risk of sharing this, but I'm in a position where I have an established career. I'm pretty safe. And so I think that's okay. On my hardest days, I sometimes am tough on myself, but it doesn't take away from anything I've accomplished. I'm still so proud of everything I've accomplished. And I'm glad I sought out help, because now I am the happiest, best version of myself. And I wish that for all of you. And I think this is just getting harder and harder now with social media and how, we're on demand all the time and we can do so much more. So we really get overloaded. So just take care of your mental health, and then that will hopefully help you, be able to make all the best choices in your life.